Let's learn about variables. What is a variable? Well, basically, previously, in the first lesson, we learned that a valid program could just be any of these things. But that isn't very useful. What does one mean? What does an empty word mean? Surely we would want to use these things for something. Sure, we could go 1 plus 1 if we wanted 2, or 1 plus 1 plus 1 if we wanted 3, but that gets a bit cumbersome. So we could store these numbers in something called variables. This is my first variable, and we use the equal sign to assign, or to point to, or to reference, or to allocate, or whatever other fancy word you want to use. We basically just want to take these words that I just typed here and set that to some variable, some character or some number or whatever we want to do. So we'll choose the word variable. Quotations indicate that it is something called a string, which is just a fancy way of saying a word. I have no idea why it's called a string, to be honest with you, and I studied computer science. So now, this is my variable, is called variable, and we can do things. You wouldn't think that you can do this, but you can add things in Python. You can add strings in Python. I mean, obviously we can add things. You saw me add things here. So what else can we do? Age equals, how old am I? 64. We can age plus equals 1. Now what is it? Age is 65. That's incredible. We are teaching the computer how to increment ages. Yes, incrementing is a fancy way of saying adding. Adding 1, just increasing, incrementing. What else can we do with variables? Well, we can, in Python at least, reassign any variable. So this is my first variable, can now be some other variable. Look at that, some other variable. Previously, where it was a variable, now it is some other variable. So as you can see, we can add variables together. We can even add variables together and get new variables. So let's say we have a variable called 1 equal 1, and a variable called 2 equal, yeah, you guessed it, 2. And we say 3 is equal to 1 plus 2. And 3 evaluates to 3. Can you believe it? I am blowing my own mind here, and I've been doing this for years. So, to recap, previously in our first lesson, we established that we have data, essentially, that is a valid program, but isn't very useful until we do something with it. The second step to doing something with it is to create variables. We can create variables by applying this little equal sign in between the data that we want and the thing we want to call it. Now this is very important because you will see people doing things like this. I is equal to 1 and it is equal to, that's not going to work, is equal to, and now I have no idea what Iesu fbisa is, but if you said a list of numbers, then I would know that that is a list of numbers without having to look at what the list of numbers is. So frickin' name your variables something easy to understand. We are not in the 60s where we're counting every frickin' bit. We are in the year 2022, or whenever you're watching this, and we have lots of memory to play with. So don't you worry.